The Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting kicks off in Omaha this weekend, the proverbial Woodstock for capitalists. We are joined by David Winters of the Wintergreen Fund to talk about expectations and some of the moves that Buffett has made since the last year. David, you followed Warren Buffett for quite a long time. You're a big holder in Berkshire Hathaway. I've got to talk about the biggest acquisition Berkshire's ever made, which came in the last year, and that's Burlington Northern, the railroads. Was that a smart move?
Yes. You
say that with a little trepidation.
Well, I think I love railroads, so just full disclosure. But I think the other thing is that it's a great investment for a very long-term perspective.
Which is what Warren Buffett has.
Exactly.
Were you surprised at all when you heard the news?
Not really. Yes. But, he'd already had a big stake, so it sort of made sense to...
Yeah.
But I think it's a full price, and they'll have control of all the cash flows, so it makes sense. But it's, I think he said it's a 100-year time frame.
Yeah, he did. And I really want to talk about Goldman Sachs and GE, the two companies that Warren put billions of dollars in 2008, in the fall of 2008. He made waves doing that. He really garnered a lot of support, especially for Goldman Sachs. And you look at the fraud charges against Goldman right now. I know Goldman, you're a holder in Goldman. What do you make of all of that? And do you still have the faith that you had before in Goldman Sachs?
Well, Pompey, it's a shocking situation. And I think it is probably, I can't speak for the company, but I think it's for them as well. And we're just going to have to see what happens from a regulatory perspective. And, unfortunately, this is probably going to take some time. Mm-hmm. Because I think you've got, both the government and the company in a standoff situation. I think ultimately the franchise is an amazing franchise. And the crisis made Goldman stronger. What happens out of this whole... Mm-hmm. situation, that's anybody's guess. I think ultimately it will be resolved, but it's not good in the short run.
No, not at all, especially from a PR standpoint. Very difficult for Goldman Sachs. As a big investor in Berkshire Hathaway, how would you rate the investments that Warren made in Goldman and in GE sort of at the height of the crisis? Looking at them now, good moves? You got a very sweet deal on them, mm-hmm. Nice payback, nice returns in terms of dividends. But
I think that Goldman makes perfect sense. What they're doing, and all their competitors, or many of their competitors, are impaired or gone. So I think that was a very sensible thing to do. General Electric, it's going to be much more dependent on how does the industrial economy do.
The scrutiny on Goldman Sachs, do you think that has impacted investors' perception of Berkshire Hathaway at all?
I think probably to some extent, but I think it's more affected Goldman. It's a relatively small piece of the gigantic puzzle that is Berkshire Hathaway.
Sure.
So I think it affects it, but not nearly to the extent that it affects, what people perceive of Goldman.
And Warren is sure to get a lot of questions about it at the annual meeting
Sure.
this weekend. How do you expect it to be handled, and what are the big questions you expect investors to want answers to?
Well, I think that, they're trying to filter the question so the quality of the question goes up. Certainly there'll be Goldman questions. There'll probably be, the inevitable succession questions.
Which never gets answered, so I don't know why people keep
right.
asking.
And, you might get the classic, I'm 5 years old, what should I read kind of question. I think you'll get some questions about, the underlying business mm-hmm. and what's going on in the world. And those I think they'll be very receptive to.
And in terms, finally, of where Berkshire goes from here and what 2010 means for Berkshire Hathaway, not necessarily the biggest acquisitions, but what moves do you expect the company to make, or do you expect it to sort of hold its ground?
Look, I think they're opportunistic. So if they find a fat pitch, they'll do it, Poppy. And if not, they'll just keep the cash. I think what's so interesting is that at some point the insurance business will get better. And that'll be a huge lift for Berkshire. And when the domestic economy improves, that'll also be a meaningful lift.
In the housing market.
Exactly. So I think that there's loaded spring aspects to Berkshire, and even though it's had a bounce, it could be an even bigger bounce. And that's what we think about at Wintergreen when we think about Berkshire.
And that's why you smile when you think about Berkshire.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, David. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.